The sound of a bone snapping is distinct. It is a wet, hollow crack that echoes louder than a branch snapping in winter, sharp and unmistakable. Aria Bennett's scream tore through the hushed luxury of the first-class cabin, a primal sound that made passengers jolt upright in their leather seats. Her arm hung at an impossible angle, wrist twisted backward, fingers splayed and trembling. "She attacked me!" Chief Cabin Officer Monica Hargrove stepped back, face flushed, chest heaving. "You all saw it! She became violent!" Blood roared in Aria's ears, drowning everything except the white-hot agony radiating from her shattered wrist. She cradled the ruined limb against her chest, unable to speak, unable to think beyond the consuming fire of broken bone and torn ligament. A businessman in seat 2A lurched forward. "That's not what happened. You grabbed her. You twisted." "Sir, sit down." Monica's voice cracked like a whip. "Do not interfere with crew. Operations." Passengers pulled out phones, cameras rising like a forest of accusing eyes. A woman sobbed somewhere in business class. A child asked his mother what the screaming meant. The aircraft cabin, moments ago a sanctuary of hushed privilege, had become a crime scene suspended at 39,000 feet. But we need to rewind. We need to understand how power, assumption, and cruelty converged in this aluminum tube hurtling through stratosphere. We need to see how Aria Bennett boarded this flight as herself and ended broken because someone decided she didn't belong. 6 hours earlier, Charles de Gaulle Airport stretched beneath gray Parisian skies, all steel and glass and controlled chaos. Aria moved through the terminal with the careful invisibility she'd perfected over 24 years, head down, earbuds in, existing in the spaces between other people's notice. Her backpack, worn canvas with fraying straps, hung from one shoulder. Her jeans and faded university sweatshirt marked her as unremarkable, forgettable, safe. The Premier Lounge access agent barely glanced at her boarding pass before waving her through. Inside, the space breathed wealth. Eames chairs, abstract art, a champagne bar where crystal sang against crystal. Aria found a corner seat near the windows overlooking the tarmac and pulled out her laptop, settling into work that demanded concentration she desperately needed. "Excuse me." The voice belonged to a lounge attendant, young and apologetic. "May I see your boarding pass again?" Aria looked up, fingers pausing on the keyboard. "Is something wrong?" "Just verification, policy." The attendant smiled, but the expression didn't reach her eyes. Aria handed over the pass. The attendant studied it with unnecessary thoroughness, as if expecting the paper itself to confess fraud. Around them, other guests, older, whiter, draped in designer labels, moved unchallenged through the space. "This seems legitimate," the attendant said finally, surprise evident in her tone. "It is legitimate." Aria kept her voice neutral, swallowing the familiar bitter taste of having to prove herself. "First class to New York, seat 1A. "Of course. Enjoy your time in the lounge." The attendant retreated, but Aria felt eyes tracking her movement for the next hour. Felt the weight of suspicion settling over her shoulders like an unwelcome coat. When boarding commenced, Aria joined the priority line, boarding pass clutched in her hand like a talisman. The gate agent scanned it without issue, but Aria noticed her eyes, that same flicker of confusion, that same unspoken question. How does someone who looks like you afford this? The aircraft was massive, a flagship 777 configured for transatlantic luxury. Aria turned left into first class, where the cabin smelled of leather and possibility. Seat 1A, window, bulkhead, the best seat on the plane. She'd saved for 8 months to afford this ticket. Every spare dollar from her part-time jobs funneled toward this one indulgence. Her mother's 50th birthday gift, a trip to New York together after years of talking about it. "Welcome aboard." A flight attendant smiled mechanically, eyes already moving past Aria to the passenger behind her. Aria stowed her backpack in the overhead bin and settled into 1A. The seat was enormous, cream leather that smelled expensive. A pillow and cashmere blanket waited in sealed packaging. The amenity kit promised luxury skincare. For a moment, Arya let herself feel the joy of it. This space, this comfort, this small victory. Then Monica Hargrove appeared. She was perhaps 50, with silver-streaked hair pulled into a severe bun and a face that suggested smiling was an unwelcome imposition. Her uniform was immaculate, her bearing military precise, her eyes cold as she surveyed the cabin. Those eyes landed on Arya and stopped, narrowing almost imperceptibly. "Excuse me." Monica's voice was clipped, professional, but edged with something harder. "May I see your boarding pass?" Arya's stomach dropped. "I already showed it at the gate. I need to verify seating assignments. Standard procedure." It wasn't standard procedure. Arya had flown enough to know that. But she pulled the pass from her pocket and handed it over, forcing her expression to remain neutral. Monica studied it, flipped it over, held it up to the light as if checking for counterfeit watermarks. "This is first class." "Yes, seat 1A. That's where I'm sitting." "I can see that." Monica's tone suggested Arya was being deliberately obtuse. "I'm asking how you came to have a first-class ticket." The question landed like a slap. Around them, other passengers settled in without interrogation. A man in his 60s sprawled in 2A, already accepting champagne from another flight attendant. A couple in row 3 laughed together, arranging their belongings in the generous space. No one asked them how they came to be here. "I purchased it," Arya said quietly. "With money, the usual way." "Don't be smart with me." Monica's expression hardened. "First-class tickets to New York cost upward of $6,000. You're—" She caught herself, recalibrated. "You're traveling alone, no checked bags. That backpack. I'm required to verify that all passengers are in their correct seats." "I am in my correct seat. You're holding proof of that in your hand." "This could be a printing error. It happens. Economy passengers sometimes receive incorrect seat assignments." Monica pulled out a tablet, tapping through screens. "What's your name?" "It's on the boarding pass you're holding." "Your full name?" "Arya Elizabeth Bennett." Each word felt like surrender, like proof demanded at a border crossing. Monica typed with pointed deliberation, eyes flicking between tablet, and Arya's face as if comparing a suspect to a wanted poster. The silence stretched, heavy with implication. Other passengers began to notice, conversations dying as attention shifted toward the confrontation developing in 1A. Finally, Monica looked up. "The system shows you in this seat, but I'm not comfortable with this arrangement. I'm going to speak to the captain about alternative seating." "Alternative seating?" Arya's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. "I have an assigned seat, a purchased seat. What possible reason?" "The reason is that I have discretion over cabin assignments for passenger safety and comfort." Monica leaned closer, voice dropping but losing none of its steel. "And I don't believe you belong in first class. So either you can accept reassignment graciously, or we can have a more difficult conversation." Arya's pulse hammered in her throat. She'd prepared for turbulence, for jet lag, for customs lines. She hadn't prepared for this, for having to defend her existence in a seat she'd rightfully purchased. "I'm not moving. This is my assigned seat." "Then we have a problem." Monica straightened, voice rising to carry across the cabin. "Lena, could you come here, please?" A younger flight attendant approached, her expression uncertain. She couldn't have been more than 25, with dark hair pulled back and eyes that darted nervously between Monica and Arya. "Yes, Monica." "This passenger is refusing to cooperate with a seat reassignment. I need you to witness my request for captain intervention." Lena's gaze landed on Arya, and something flickered there. Recognition, maybe, or sympathy. "Has there been an issue with the ticketing?" "The issue is compliance." Monica's tone sharpened. "I don't need to justify crew decisions to junior staff. Go inform Captain Rousseau that we have a passenger situation in 1A. "Wait!" The businessman in 2A set down his champagne glass, leaning into the aisle. I've been sitting here the whole time. This young woman hasn't done anything wrong. She showed her boarding pass. It's valid. And you're harassing her for no apparent reason." Monica's face flushed crimson. "Sir, I'm going to ask you to stay out of this. Crew authority supersedes passenger opinion. Crew authority doesn't include discrimination." The word hung in the air like smoke. Other passengers shifted in their seats, some pulling out phones, others averting their eyes in the practiced way of people who'd rather not get involved. "How dare you?" Monica's voice trembled with rage. "I am enforcing safety protocols. If you continue to interfere, I'll have you removed as well." "For what?" "Pointing out that you've questioned exactly one passenger's ticket, and she happens to be the only black woman in first class." The man stood, tall and graying, with the bearing of someone accustomed to being heard. "I'm a civil rights attorney. I know what this looks like. It looks like you're creating a hostile environment." Monica spun toward Lena. "Call security. Tell them we have 2 disruptive passengers refusing crew instructions." "Monica, maybe we should—" Lena began. "Now." Lena hesitated, eyes meeting Arya's for a fraction of a second. Then she retreated toward the galley, shoulders hunched. Arya felt tears burning behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. Crying would become evidence. Proof she was unstable, emotional, dangerous. Instead, she forced her voice to stay level. "I would like to speak to the captain directly." "The captain will speak to security first. Then, if necessary, to you." Monica crossed her arms. "In the meantime, I'm asking you one final time to gather your belongings and move to the seat you'll be reassigned to. If you refuse, you'll be deplaned." "Deplaned?" Arya repeated the word, testing its weight. "You're threatening to remove me from this aircraft because I won't voluntarily give up the seat I purchased. I'm offering you a choice. Make it voluntarily or make it involuntarily. Either way, you're not staying in 1A. The attorney stepped fully into the aisle, pulling out his phone. "I'm recording this, everything you just said, every threat you just made. Recording crew members without permission violates. Federal law protects my right to document potential civil rights violations. Keep talking. You're building my client's case beautifully." "Your client?" Monica's voice climbed toward hysteria. "She's not your client. You don't even know her." "I do now. Miss Bennett, my name is Richard Hayes. I'm offering you legal representation pro bono for whatever happens next. Do you accept?" Arya looked at this stranger, this man who'd chosen to stand when others looked away, and felt something crack in her chest. "Yes, thank you." "Noted and recorded." Richard turned back to Monica. "Now, are you going to let this passenger remain in her assigned seat, or are you going to continue this illegal harassment?" Monica's hand shook as she pointed at Richard. "You are interfering with a flight crew's duties. That's a federal offense. Security." 2 airport security officers appeared at the aircraft door, radios crackling. They surveyed the scene with practiced wariness. The defiant flight attendant, the standing passenger, the young woman in 1A who looked like she wanted to disappear into the leather upholstery. "What's the situation?" The older officer's voice was neutral, professionally detached. "These 2 passengers are refusing crew instructions and creating a disturbance." Monica's composure had returned, her voice steady again. "The woman in 1A is sitting in a seat I believe was assigned in error. When I attempted to resolve the issue, both she and this man became aggressive and threatening." "That's a lie." Richard held up his phone. "I have video evidence of the entire interaction. This crew member has been harassing Miss Bennett since boarding, questioning her ticket without cause, demanding she move despite having a valid boarding pass, and threatening removal when she refused to comply." The younger officer moved closer to Arya. "Ma'am, can I see your boarding pass and identification?" Arya handed them over with shaking hands. The officer examined both carefully, then pulled out a tablet and scanned the boarding pass barcode. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture relaxed. "This is legitimate. Ticket purchased 8 months ago, paid in full, seat 1A assigned at booking." He looked at Monica. "What's the actual problem here?" "The problem is that I have Discretion over seating arrangements for safety and passenger comfort. Based on what safety concern? The older officer cut her off. Has this passenger done something threatening? Violated regulations? Appeared intoxicated or unstable? She's been combative since I approached her. No. Richard's voice was steel. I watched the entire interaction. She answered questions calmly, provided documentation, and only became defensive when threatened with removal from a seat she legally occupies. The only person who's been combative is you. The older officer studied Monica for a long moment. Ma'am, I need you to be very clear about something. If you're asking us to remove a passenger, there needs to be a legitimate safety reason. Gut feelings, personal discomfort, or disagreements about who belongs in first class don't qualify. So I'm going to ask you directly. Has this passenger violated any actual regulation? Monica's mouth opened, closed. Her eyes darted to the other passengers watching, to the phones recording, to the security officers waiting for an answer she couldn't give without admitting the truth. I want the captain's input, she said finally. Then let's get the captain. The older officer gestured toward the cockpit. But these passengers stay seated unless he determines there's a genuine safety issue. Captain Rousseau emerged 5 minutes later. A man in his 50s with silver at his temples and the confident bearing of someone who'd logged 30,000 flight hours. His eyes swept the cabin, taking in the standing passengers, the recording phones, the palpable tension. What's going on? His accent was French, but his English perfect. Monica launched into her version immediately, words tumbling over each other. Disruptive passenger, invalid ticket, aggressive behavior, passenger safety concerns. She painted Arya as threatening, Richard as interfering, herself as simply doing her duty. Captain Rousseau listened without expression. Then he turned to the security officers. What did you find? Tickets valid, passengers been cooperative, no regulation violations. The older officer's tone suggested he'd seen this situation before and was tired of it. The crew member wants reassignment based on personal discretion. Personal discretion. Captain Rousseau repeated the phrase slowly. He looked at Arya, really looked at her, taking in her youth, her anxiety, her carefully controlled fear. Miss, have you caused any problems on this flight? No, sir. I just want to sit in the seat I paid for. And you, sir? He addressed Richard. Why are you involved? Because I watched a crew member harass a passenger for no legitimate reason. I'm an attorney. I recognize discrimination when I see it. Discrimination? Captain Rousseau's expression hardened. He turned to Monica. Chief, Hargrove, step into the galley with me. Now. They disappeared behind the curtain. Voices rose and fell, too muffled to make out words, but the tone was clear. One person explaining, the other not accepting the explanation. The conversation lasted less than 3 minutes. When they returned, Monica's face was ashen. Captain Rousseau addressed the cabin, voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption. The passenger in seat 1A has a valid ticket and will remain in her assigned seat. We'll be departing shortly. He turned to Monica, voice dropping but still audible to those nearby. Chief Hargrove, you're relieved of cabin duties for this flight. Return to the crew rest area. Lena will assume your responsibilities. Monica's jaw dropped. Captain, you can't. I can, and I am. We'll discuss this further upon landing. Go. The humiliation on Monica's face was terrible to witness. Rage and disbelief and something darker churning beneath the surface. Her eyes found Arya, and the hatred there was so pure, so concentrated, that Arya actually flinched. This isn't over, Monica said quietly. The words meant for Arya alone. Then she turned and stalked toward the rear of the aircraft, spine rigid, hands clenched into fists. Let me ask you a question. How many more Aryas are out there right now, being harassed with no one watching, no one recording, no one believing them? If this story already has you hooked, please hit that like button, because engagement is what makes these stories reach people who need to see them. subscribe, because injustice doesn't stop when you close this video. And share this. Captain Rousseau addressed Arya directly. Miss Bennett, I'm deeply sorry for what just occurred. You have every right to be here. Please let the crew know if there's anything we can do to make the remainder of your flight more comfortable. Thank you. Arya's voice came out hoarse. She couldn't quite believe it was over. Couldn't trust that she'd won this small, exhausting battle. Richard settled back into 2A, giving her a small nod. You handled that with remarkable composure. I didn't feel composed. I felt terrified. That's what composure is. Feeling terrified and staying steady anyway. He extended his business card across the aisle. If there are any repercussions from this, or if you want to file a formal complaint, call me. What happened here was unacceptable. The security officers departed. The remaining crew members moved through the cabin with forced smiles, trying to restore normalcy. Lena approached Arya with visible trepidation. Miss Bennett, I'm so sorry about what happened. Is there anything I can get you? Water, champagne, anything at all? Just, can we please take off? I just want to get to New York. Of course, we'll be pushing back in just a few minutes. But the peace lasted only until the aircraft leveled off at cruising altitude. Arya had finally started to relax, muscles unclenching, when Lena appeared again, her face troubled. Miss Bennett, I hate to ask this, but Chief Hargrove is requesting to speak with you. She says it's important. Arya's stomach nodded. She was relieved of duty. Why is she still? She's not approaching you in an official capacity. She says she wants to apologize privately. Lena lowered her voice. You're under no obligation to speak with her. I can tell her no. Arya considered refusing. Every instinct screamed to avoid Monica, to maintain distance, to let the wound scab over without reopening it. But another part of her, the part that still believed in redemption, in people being better than their worst moments, wondered if maybe Monica genuinely wanted to make amends. Where is she? The forward galley. I'll be right there. You won't be alone with her. Arya unbuckled and followed Lena forward, legs unsteady on the slight incline. The galley was small, cramped, designed for efficiency rather than comfort. Monica stood with her back to the wall, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Thank you for agreeing to talk, Monica said, voice flat. I wanted to explain myself without an audience. Explain what? Arya kept her distance, hyper-aware of Lena hovering just outside the galley entrance. Why I questioned your ticket. It wasn't personal. I've worked for this airline for 23 years. I've seen every kind of fraud, every scam, every way people try to get something they didn't pay for. Monica's tone was matter-of-fact, as if she were explaining weather patterns. When I saw you, young, dressed casually, traveling alone without luggage, my training told me something was off. Your training told you I looked like I couldn't afford first class. That's not what I said. It's what you meant. Arya felt anger replacing fear, hot and clarifying. You saw me and made assumptions. You didn't question anyone else's ticket, just mine. Because the others fit the profile of typical first-class passengers. And I didn't, because I'm black. The word landed between them like a grenade. Monica's face flushed. That's not fair. I don't see color. I see patterns, behavior, risk factors. You see what you expect to see. And you expected me to be a problem because people who look like me don't belong in spaces like this. Arya's voice shook but held steady. You humiliated me in front of an entire cabin. You tried to have me removed from a seat I paid for. And now you want me to believe it wasn't personal? I was doing my job. Your job is passenger safety, not policing who you think deserves luxury. Arya took a step closer, emboldened by her own fury. You know what the worst part is? I believed you at first. When you questioned my ticket, part of me wondered if maybe I had made a mistake. Maybe I didn't belong here, because people like you have been telling people like me we don't belong our entire lives, and sometimes we start to believe it. Monica's expression hardened. If you're going to play the victim card, I am the victim. You victimized me. And instead of apologizing, you're trying to justify it. I asked you here to clear the air, not to be attacked. Then you shouldn't have attacked me first. Arya's voice rose, and she heard it echo in the small space. Took a breath, forced herself to calm. I don't accept your explanation. I don't forgive you, and I want you to stay away from me for the rest of this flight. She turned to leave, but Monica's next words stopped her cold. You think you're special because a lawyer defended you? Because the captain took your side? Monica's voice dripped venom. You got lucky today, but luck runs out, and when yours does, you'll learn that people like you only get to play in our world as long as we let you. Arya turned back slowly. People like me? People who don't know their place. The mask had finally fallen. No more pretense of procedure or training or safety concerns. Just naked prejudice, stripped of its professional camouflage. Lena heard that. Arya said quietly, You just threatened me, after being relieved of duty for harassing me. Monica's eyes widened as she realized her mistake. That's not what I meant. Yes, it was. Arya looked at Lena, who stood frozen in the galley entrance, face pale. You heard it, right? Lena nodded mutely. Then I want it documented. I want a formal report filed, and I want her nowhere near me. Arya pushed past Lena, heading back toward her seat on legs that barely held her. She collapsed into 1A, heart racing, hands shaking, adrenaline flooding her system. Richard looked over with concern. Are you all right? No, but I will be. Arya pulled out her phone, fingers trembling as she opened the voice memo app. She'd been recording since entering the galley, something her mother had taught her years ago. Always document, always have proof, because your word against theirs will never be enough. She had Monica's threat, clear and undeniable, preserved in digital amber. The rest of the flight passed in tense quiet. Lena brought Arya water, food, apologized 3 more times with genuine distress. Other flight attendants gave Monica's rest area a wide berth, whispering among themselves. Word had spread through the crew that something serious had happened, something that would have consequences beyond this single flight. Arya tried to work, to watch movies, to sleep. Nothing stuck. Her mind kept replaying the confrontations, examining them from every angle, wondering what she could have said differently, done differently, been differently to avoid the whole nightmare. But she knew the answer. The only thing she could have been differently was someone else. Someone who fit Monica's mental image of who belonged in first class. Someone whose presence didn't challenge assumptions built over a lifetime. 4 hours into the flight, turbulence hit. Not severe, but enough to make the cabin shudder and overhead bins rattle. The seatbelt sign chimed on. Flight attendants moved through the cabin securing loose items, checking that passengers were buckled. Monica emerged from the crew rest area. Lena intercepted her immediately. Monica, you're not supposed to be working. I'm checking safety compliance. That's my responsibility whether I'm officially on duty or not. Monica's voice was cold, controlled, nothing like the venom she'd shown in the galley. She moved through the cabin with mechanical efficiency, checking seatbelts, securing tray tables. She was professional, courteous, gave no hint of the confrontations that had preceded this moment. Until she reached row 1. Seatbelt, Monica said to Arya, tone clipped. Arya was buckled, had been since the sign illuminated. It's fastened. It's not tight enough. Monica leaned over, reaching for the belt. Don't touch me. Arya pressed herself against the window, alarm spiking. I'm ensuring passenger safety. You're not on duty. You were relieved. Stay away from me. Monica's hand closed around Arya's seatbelt, yanking it tighter. I'm checking compliance. Stop being dramatic. Get your hands off me. Arya tried to push Monica's arm away, her voice rising in panic. She's assaulting me! Monica jerked backward, voice pitched to carry across the cabin. This passenger just struck me. That's a lie. Arya's breath came in short gasps. She grabbed me. I was defending myself. Richard unbuckled and stood. I saw the whole thing. The crew member initiated contact after being told explicitly not to. "Sir, sit down." Monica pointed at him, then spun toward the intercom panel. "This is Chief Hargrove. I need security to meet this aircraft upon landing. Passenger in 1A has become physically violent toward crew." "You can't do that." Lena rushed forward, face stricken. "Monica, you're not authorized." "I witnessed an assault. I'm reporting it." Monica's expression was triumphant, calculated. "That passenger put her hands on me in an aggressive manner. There are federal laws against interfering with flight crew." "You were told to stay away from her." Lena's voice cracked with distress. "The captain relieved you of duty. You approached her against orders." "I was performing a safety check during turbulence. That's my right and responsibility as the senior cabin crew member on this aircraft." Monica touched her wrist gingerly, as if injured. "She pushed me. Hard. Everyone saw it." "No one saw that because it didn't happen." Aria's voice shook with rage and terror. "You're lying." "Am I?" Monica looked around the cabin. Did anyone else witness this passenger's aggressive behavior? Her refusal to comply with safety instructions? Her physical violence? Silence. Passengers looked away, suddenly fascinated by their screens, their magazines, the view outside their windows. The same people who'd recorded the earlier confrontation now chose invisibility over involvement. Only Richard spoke. "I saw you initiate contact. I saw her try to protect herself, and I'm recording this entire interaction." "Then you're recording evidence of assault on a crew member." Monica smiled, cold and satisfied. "Thank you for providing documentation." The turbulence worsened, the aircraft shuddering more violently. The captain's voice came over the intercom, accent thick with irritation. "Crew, to your seats immediately. Everyone remain buckled until further notice." Monica ignored the order, moving instead to the galley phone. She spoke quietly, urgently, her back to the cabin. When she returned, her expression was serene. "Security will be waiting. I've filed an official report. Assault on a flight crew member is a federal offense punishable by up to 20 years imprisonment." She looked directly at Aria. "I hope your seat was worth it." Aria felt the walls closing in. This couldn't be happening. She'd defended herself from unwanted touching and somehow become the criminal. She'd done everything right. Remained calm, provided documentation, followed rules, and still ended up targeted, threatened, criminalized. "I have the recording from the galley," Aria said desperately. "Where you threatened me. Where you said people like me don't belong. That's evidence of your harassment, your bias. That's your interpretation of a private conversation." Monica's tone was reasonable, maddeningly calm. "I was expressing concern about passenger behavior, not making threats. Any reasonable person would understand that." "You said my luck would run out." "I said luck can be unpredictable. That's not a threat. It's an observation about life." Monica shrugged. "But your recording does capture you becoming agitated and hostile. Thank you for that evidence as well." The turbulence continued for another 20 minutes. Aria sat rigid in her seat, mind racing through options that all led nowhere good. Even with recordings, even with Richard's testimony, it would be her word against Monica's. A young black woman versus a 23-year veteran flight attendant with authority and institution behind her. She knew how that story ended. When the turbulence finally eased and the seatbelt sign chimed off, Lena approached Aria with tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry. I've documented everything I witnessed. I'll testify to what really happened. Monica had no right to approach you, no right to touch you." "Will it matter?" Aria's voice was hollow. "She's filing federal charges. I'll be arrested when we land. Richard is a lawyer. He'll help you. He's a civil rights lawyer, not a criminal defense attorney. And even if he was, I can't afford—" Aria's voice broke. She'd saved for 8 months to buy this ticket. She had maybe $300 in her checking account. Legal fees would destroy her financially before they even began helping her legally. Richard appeared beside Lena. "Miss Bennett, I've contacted a colleague in New York who specializes in false arrest cases. She's already reviewing the videos I sent. We're going to fight this." "I can't pay. I told you, pro bono." No cost to you. Richard's expression was fierce. What's happening here is an abuse of power, plain and simple. Monica Hargrove is weaponizing federal law to retaliate against you for standing up to her discrimination. We're not letting her get away with it. But the arrest will be overturned once prosecutors see the evidence. But yes, you'll likely be detained initially. That's the reality. I'm sorry. Richard squeezed her shoulder gently. Stay calm. Answer questions minimally. Don't make statements without legal counsel present. We'll get you out as quickly as possible. The final 2 hours of the flight were agony. Arya couldn't eat, couldn't focus, couldn't do anything except watch the flight tracker count down miles and minutes until her inevitable arrest. Other passengers avoided eye contact, embarrassed by association or simply eager to maintain plausible deniability about what they'd witnessed. Monica stayed in the crew rest area, but her presence permeated the cabin like poison. She'd won. She'd turned victim into perpetrator with a few lies and the institutional power to make those lies credible. The descent into New York began. The Manhattan skyline appeared through clouds, beautiful and indifferent. The aircraft touched down with barely a bump, taxied to the gate with mechanical precision. The seatbelt sign chimed off. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated until the captain turns off the seatbelt sign. Lena's voice over the intercom was tight with tension. There will be a slight delay in deplaning. Through the window, Arya saw them. 4 uniformed officers waiting at the jet bridge, along with what looked like airline security and management. An entire delegation assembled to remove one terrified young woman from an aircraft. The aircraft door opened. The officers boarded, faces professionally blank. They moved through first class with purpose, stopping at row 1. Arya. Bennett? The lead officer's voice was neither kind nor cruel, just procedural. Yes. Arya's voice came out barely above a whisper. We need you to come with us. There's been a report of assault on a crew member. She didn't assault anyone. Richard stood, blocking the aisle. I witnessed the entire interaction. The crew member initiated contact after being explicitly told not to. Sir, step aside. We're not here to litigate. We're here to detain a suspect. On what grounds? What evidence do you have beyond the word of someone with clear bias and motive to lie? Sir, final warning. Step aside or you'll be charged with obstruction. Richard moved, fury and helplessness warring in his expression. The officers gestured for Arya to stand. She did. Legs weak, the world tilting around her. This wasn't real. Couldn't be real. She'd boarded a plane as herself and was now being arrested as a criminal because she dared to exist in a space someone else decided she didn't deserve. Turn around, please. Hands behind your back. The handcuffs closed around Arya's wrists with cold finality. Metal biting into skin. Click, click. The sound of doors closing, of freedom ending, of a nightmare that kept finding new depths. Monica emerged from the crew rest area as Arya was being led past. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Arya saw it. The satisfaction, the vindication, the pure malicious joy of someone who'd won by destroying someone else. Do you know that this happens every single day? To people who don't have captains who intervene, lawyers who document, or viral videos that force accountability. Right now, you have a choice. Don't just scroll past and let this be just another story you consumed and forgot. You can act. Like this video if you believe power without accountability is tyranny. Subscribe, because these stories need platforms that amplify truth over comfort. Wait, a new voice, sharp with authority. Captain Rousseau strode up the aisle, face thunderous. Officers, hold on a moment. Sir, we have our orders. And I'm the captain of this aircraft. Nothing happens in my cabin without my knowledge. Rousseau looked at Monica. Chief Hargrove, did you or did you not approach this passenger after I explicitly relieved you of duty? Monica's satisfaction flickered. I was conducting a safety check during turbulence. That's not what I asked. Did you approach her after being relieved? Yes, but did she push you, or did she defend herself from unwanted contact? Monica's jaw tightened. She was non-compliant with safety procedures. Answer the question. Did she initiate physical contact, or did you? Monica's composure cracked, just slightly. I was adjusting her seatbelt for safety. She became aggressive. After you touched her without permission, following multiple demands that you stay away from her. Captain Rousseau turned to the officers. I need to see your supervisor. Now. Sir, we have a sworn report from a crew member. You have a report from a crew member I removed from duty for passenger harassment, who then violated my direct orders by approaching the passenger she'd been harassing, who then filed retaliatory charges when the passenger defended herself from unwanted touching. Rousseau's voice was ice. I am the commanding officer of this aircraft. My testimony supersedes hers, and I'm telling you this arrest is based on false pretenses. The officers exchanged uncertain glances. The lead officer spoke into his radio, voice low. A crackling response came back. He listened, then looked at Rousseau. Our supervisor is on the way up. Everyone stays put until he arrives. They stood in frozen tableau. Aria in handcuffs, officers flanking her, Captain Rousseau blocking the aisle, Monica against the galley wall with her mask of certainty beginning to slip. Passengers craned necks, phones raised, documenting everything. The supervisor arrived 3 minutes later, a gray-haired man with a weathered face and eyes that suggested he'd seen every variety of airport drama. He surveyed the scene, then addressed Rousseau. Captain, I'm Sergeant Mitchell. What's your assessment of the situation? The crew member who filed the assault report was relieved of duty earlier in the flight for harassing this passenger. I explicitly ordered her to stay away. She violated that order by approaching the passenger during turbulence and initiating unwanted physical contact. The passenger defended herself. That's not assault, that's self-defense against continued harassment. Chief Hargrove? Sergeant Mitchell turned to Monica. Is this accurate? The captain is omitting context. Is it accurate that you were relieved of duty? Monica hesitated. Yes. Is it accurate that you were ordered to stay away from this passenger? Yes, but is it accurate that you approached her anyway? For safety purposes. Did you touch her after she told you not to? Monica's silence was answer enough. Sergeant Mitchell studied her for a long moment, then turned to his officers. Remove the handcuffs. We're not making this arrest. Sergeant, the report is from someone who violated her commanding officer's direct orders and then filed charges against a victim of her harassment. That's not a credible report. He looked at Monica. Ma'am, I suggest you get yourself a lawyer, because if I were Miss Bennett, I'd be filing charges of my own. The handcuffs came off. Aria's wrists were red and raw where the metal had bitten. She rubbed them absently, unable to process what had just happened. She'd been seconds from arrest, from having her life destroyed, and then... Thank you, she whispered to Captain Rousseau. Don't thank me for doing what should have been done from the beginning. His expression was heavy with something like shame. Miss Bennett, on behalf of this airline, I offer you my deepest apologies. What you experienced today was unconscionable. Monica lunged forward suddenly, face twisted with rage. This is ridiculous. She assaulted me. She pushed me. Just because she's... Careful. Sergeant Mitchell's voice was sharp. Very careful about what you say next. Monica caught herself, but not before everyone heard what she'd almost said. Not before the implication hung in the air, thick and undeniable. Miss Hargrove, you're being detained for filing a false police report, Sergeant Mitchell said. Officers, please escort her off the aircraft. What? No, I have rights. I was doing my job. Monica struggled as officers took her arms. This is because of her. Everything was fine until she... Keep talking. Richard had his phone out, recording. Please, keep digging. They led Monica away, her protests echoing down the jet bridge until distance finally muted them. The remaining passengers sat in stunned silence, processing the reversal they'd just witnessed. Ladies and gentlemen, Captain Rousseau addressed the cabin. I apologize for the extended delay. You're free to deplane. Miss Bennett, please remain for a moment. The cabin emptied slowly, passengers filing past Arya with expressions ranging from sympathy to curiosity to the guilty relief of those who'd witnessed injustice and done nothing. Richard waited with her, as did Lena, whose face was streaked with tears. When the cabin was empty, Rousseau sat in the seat across the aisle. Miss Bennett, I need you to understand something. What happened today was not isolated to Chief Hargrove. It was a failure of the system that employed her, trained her, and enabled her behavior for 23 years. She had complaints before, Arya said. It wasn't a question. 7 formal complaints over 15 years, all dismissed as personality conflicts or misunderstandings. We didn't want to see the pattern because addressing it would require admitting we'd failed passengers for decades. Rousseau's voice was heavy. You won't be the last person she tried to humiliate. But if I have any say in it, you'll be the last person she succeeds in harming. What happens now? Now you decide. The airline will offer you compensation, significant compensation, in exchange for signing a non-disclosure agreement. They'll want this to disappear quietly. I'm telling you not to sign anything without legal review. He glanced at Richard. I assume you'll advise her properly. Absolutely. Richard's expression was grim. This isn't ending with a payout and silence. This is ending with accountability. Rousseau nodded. I'd hoped you'd say that. For what it's worth, I'll testify to everything I witnessed. Everything I should have stopped sooner. They finally deplaned 90 minutes after landing. Arya moved through the airport in a daze, her mother's worried face appearing in the arrivals hall like a beacon. The hug nearly broke her, all the fear and rage and exhaustion flooding out in sobs against her mother's shoulder. Baby, what happened? You were supposed to land 2 hours ago. I'll explain everything, but Mom, I need you to know, I didn't do anything wrong. I know that. I will always know that. The next week was a blur of lawyers, reporters, and airline executives. The video Richard recorded had gone viral within hours. 40 million views across platforms, spawning think pieces about discrimination, airline safety, and abuse of authority. Monica's face became synonymous with everything wrong with customer service and institutional bias. The airline offered Arya $2 million to sign an NDA and go away. Richard advised her to refuse. They're not paying you for the trauma, he explained in his office overlooking Manhattan. They're paying you to let them continue operating the same way that enabled Monica in the first place. Take the money and Monica's just the bad apple. Force accountability and maybe, just maybe, the next person doesn't go through what you did. I can't afford to turn down $2 million. Arya's voice was hollow. Do you know what that money would mean for my family? I do, and I'm not telling you what to choose. I'm telling you what the choice actually is. Financial security now, or the possibility of systemic change that helps people who'll never have $2 million offered to them. Arya thought about the passengers who'd looked away, about the complaints filed against Monica over 15 years that vanished into bureaucratic silence, about every person who'd been told they didn't belong and had no power to fight back. No NDA, she said finally. I want a public settlement. I want training reforms. I want independent oversight. And I want Monica prosecuted to the fullest extent possible. The airline balked, threatened, implied Arya was being unreasonable, vindictive, ungrateful. But the public outcry was too loud, the evidence too damning, the risk of going to trial too great. They settled for terms that included everything Arya demanded. $3 million. Comprehensive anti-discrimination training for all staff, an independent passenger rights office, and full cooperation with criminal prosecution of Monica Hargrove. Monica's trial happened 6 months later. Arya testified for 4 hours, voice steady, recounting every moment of harassment, every threat, every violation. Richard played the recordings, the galley confrontation, the final assault, Monica's rage as she was led away. The jury deliberated for 90 minutes, guilty on all counts, filing a false police report, assault, abuse of authority, violating civil rights. Monica was sentenced to 2 years in prison, followed by 5 years probation and a permanent ban from any position of authority over others. Arya watched the sentencing from the gallery, feeling nothing close to satisfaction. Justice had been served, but it couldn't erase the trauma, couldn't give her back the innocence of believing that following rules would protect her, couldn't undo the knowledge that she'd been seconds from arrest, from having her life destroyed, and only luck, in the form of a principled captain and a lawyer who happened to be sitting nearby, had saved her. 1 year after the incident, Arya stood at a podium in Washington, D.C., addressing a Senate subcommittee on transportation safety and passenger rights. The room was packed. Senators, airline executives, advocates, journalists. She'd been invited to testify about her experience and the reforms it had sparked. "When I boarded that flight," Arya began, hands gripping the podium to keep them steady, "I was excited, nervous. It was my first time in first class, a gift I'd saved months to afford. I never imagined I'd end that journey in handcuffs, accused of a crime I didn't commit, simply because someone decided I didn't look like I belonged." She detailed the confrontations, the escalation, the moment Monica grabbed her wrist and twisted until bone cracked, a detail that made several senators lean forward, expressions sharpening. "But here's what haunts me," Arya continued. "I was lucky. I had a lawyer sitting nearby who chose to intervene. I had a captain who finally enforced his authority. I had video evidence and witnesses willing to testify. Most people targeted the way I was targeted don't have any of that. They're removed from planes in silence. They're arrested, prosecuted, banned from airlines, and nobody records it. Nobody fights for them. Nobody believes them." Senator Patricia Vance spoke first. "Miss Bennett, the airline industry has argued that crew discretion is essential for safety, that limiting their authority could put passengers at risk. How do you respond to that?" "I'd say crew discretion is different from crew tyranny. Monica Hargrove had discretion. She used it to harass me for hours, violate direct orders from her captain, and file false charges when I defended myself from her assault. That's not discretion, that's abuse of power. And it was enabled by a system that prioritized employee protection over passenger dignity." "The airline has implemented reforms since your incident," another senator noted. "Independent oversight, anti-bias training, a passenger advocate office. Do you believe these changes are sufficient?" Arya chose her words carefully. "They're a start, but reform can't stop at one airline. Every carrier needs independent oversight. Every crew member needs training that addresses implicit bias, not just explicit discrimination, and passengers need clear channels to report abuse without fear of retaliation." "Some critics say you profited from your trauma," Senator Vance said bluntly. "That you used what happened to extract a large settlement and media attention. How do you respond?" "I'd say those critics don't understand trauma. The $3 million I received doesn't undo the nightmares, doesn't erase the panic attacks I still have in enclosed spaces, doesn't give me back the sense of safety I had before Monica Hargrove decided I was unworthy of basic human dignity." Arya's voice hardened. "I didn't profit from trauma. I survived it, and I used my platform to demand changes that might prevent the next person from experiencing what I did. If that makes me opportunistic, I'll wear that label proudly." The hearing lasted 4 hours. Airline executives squirmed under questioning. Pilots and flight attendants testified about toxic workplace cultures that encouraged bias. Civil rights advocates presented data showing patterns of discrimination across carriers. Black passengers 3 times more likely to be removed from flights. Muslim passengers routinely subjected to random additional screening. Disabled passengers denied assistance and dignity. By the end, 3 senators had committed to drafting comprehensive airline passenger protection legislation. It wasn't everything, but it was movement. It was acknowledgement. It was the system finally, grudgingly, admitting it had failed. After the hearing, Arya found Monica waiting in the corridor outside. She'd been released from prison 2 months earlier, having served 18 months of her 2-year sentence. She looked smaller than Arya remembered, grayer, thinner, diminished by incarceration and consequence. "I don't want trouble," Monica said quickly, hands raised. "I just wanted to say something." Aria's first instinct was to walk away. Nothing Monica could say would matter. But something made her stop, made her turn, made her listen to the woman who tried to destroy her. "I'm sorry." Monica's voice was barely audible. "I know that's inadequate. I know it doesn't fix anything. But I need you to hear it. What I did to you was cruel and wrong, and based on prejudices I didn't even fully recognize I carried. You called me aggressive for defending myself. You tried to have me arrested for refusing to accept your abuse. You smiled when they put me in handcuffs." Aria's voice was ice. "And now you want forgiveness?" "No, I don't deserve forgiveness. I don't expect it." Monica looked at the floor. "I just wanted you to know that prison gave me a lot of time to think, to examine beliefs I'd held my entire life without questioning them, to see how my assumptions harmed people who didn't deserve harm. Good for you. That doesn't undo what you did. I know. Nothing can undo it. But maybe knowing I'm different now, genuinely different, not just sorry I got caught, maybe that gives you some closure." Aria studied the woman who'd broken her wrist and tried to break her spirit. Saw genuine remorse there, yes, but also the pathetic hope that absolution might come from the person she'd wronged most. "I don't forgive you," Aria said finally, "and I don't owe you closure. You want to be different? Prove it. Spend the rest of your life proving it. Speak up when you see bias. Challenge assumptions. Make yourself uncomfortable the way you made me uncomfortable. That's how you earn redemption, not through apologies, but through action." Monica nodded, tears tracking down her face. "I will. I promise I will. We'll see." Aria walked away, feeling neither satisfaction nor mercy, just exhaustion and the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, one person had genuinely learned from their cruelty. Here's my question to you that is watching. If Aria can refuse easy comfort and demand real change, can you refuse easy consumption and actually engage? Like if you believe accountability matters more than apologies. Subscribe if you think these stories deserve platforms that don't look away. 6 months later, Aria boarded another flight. Domestic this time, economy class, window seat. She'd been offered free first-class upgrades for life by 3 different airlines seeking good publicity. She'd declined them all. First class had become a symbol of trauma rather than luxury. She wasn't ready to reclaim that space yet. Maybe she never would be. The boarding process was smooth. Crew members smiled genuinely, checking tickets without suspicion, treating every passenger with baseline respect. Aria settled into her seat, plugged in earbuds, pulled out a book. Just another passenger on another flight. Halfway through boarding, a young black man stopped at her row, checking his boarding pass with confusion. "I think I'm next to you. Middle seat." "Sure, no problem." Aria grabbed her bag so he could slide past. He settled in with the apologetic shuffle of someone aware they're invading space. "First time flying alone," he admitted. Nervous. "It gets easier," Aria said. A flight attendant approached. Young, white, professional. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass?" The young man handed it over, and Aria felt her stomach tighten. Here we go again, she thought. Another round of suspicion, questioning, discrimination, dressed up as procedure. But the flight attendant just scanned it, smiled, and handed it back. "You're all set. Can I get you anything once we're airborne?" "I'm good, thanks." The attendant moved on. The young man visibly relaxed. And Aria realized. Maybe something had changed. Maybe her testimony, her refusal to stay silent, had created ripples that reached even this random flight crew. Maybe they'd been through the training, heard the stories, learned to examine their assumptions. Or maybe this attendant was just decent. Maybe she'd always been decent, and Aria's trauma had made her hypervigilant about threats that weren't actually materializing. The plane pushed back. Engines roared, the aircraft lifted, and through the window the ground fell away, cities becoming toys, rivers becoming threads. perspective shifting until individual struggles blurred into landscape. Arya felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. She was flying. Just flying. No confrontations, no handcuffs, no bone-breaking violence. Just the simple act of traveling from one place to another, the way it should have been from the beginning. The young man beside her pulled out a laptop, started working on what looked like a computer science project. Arya recognized the code on his screen. Python, maybe some machine learning algorithms. "That looks complex," she commented. He grinned, shy but proud. "Yeah, it's a project for school. Building an AI model that detects bias in hiring algorithms, trying to make systems fairer." "That's incredible. And important. Thanks. It's inspired by a lot of stuff I've read about algorithmic discrimination, how systems can perpetuate bias without anyone intending them to." He paused. "Kinda like people, I guess. Sometimes prejudice is baked in so deep we don't even see it." Arya thought about Monica, about systemic failures, about all the small moments of bias that accumulated into structures of inequality. "Yeah," she said. "Exactly like people." They flew in companionable silence for a while. Below, the country spread out. Farms and forests, cities and suburbs, the complex geography of a nation still struggling with its own contradictions. The flight landed without incident 2 hours later. Arya deplaned into a terminal that looked identical to 1,000 others. Tile floors, bright signage, the controlled chaos of travelers moving with purpose. She'd arrived. No drama, no trauma, no life-altering confrontation. It should have felt anticlimactic. Instead, it felt like victory. Her phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "Passenger Protection Act passed the House. Senate vote next week. We did it." Arya stared at the message, processing what it meant. The legislation she'd testified for, fought for, lived through hell to make possible. It was actually happening. Airlines would face real oversight. Passengers would have real protections. The changes wouldn't be perfect, wouldn't solve everything, but they'd make the system slightly less cruel for the next person targeted the way she'd been targeted. She typed back, "Thank you for everything. For believing me when it mattered." Richard's response was immediate. "You did the hard part. You refused to stay silent. That's what changed things." Outside the terminal, Arya's mother waited at the curb, face lighting up when she spotted her daughter. The hug was fierce, protective, the kind that communicated everything words couldn't. "How was the flight?" her mother asked. "Uneventful, gloriously, beautifully uneventful." Arya climbed into the car, buckling in. "Nobody questioned my ticket. Nobody touched me without permission. Nobody tried to destroy my life." That's how it should always be. I know, but it wasn't. And for a lot of people, it still isn't. They drove through city streets toward home, past neighborhoods Arya had known her entire life. Familiar landmarks scrolled by, the library where she'd spent childhood afternoons, the park where her mother used to push her on swings, the high school where she'd graduated with honors and dreams of a future she'd build herself. That future looked different now. She'd been a psychology student before the incident, planning a quiet career in research or therapy. Now she was a reluctant activist, a symbol of resistance against institutional bias, someone whose face appeared in textbooks and training videos about discrimination. "Do you ever wish it hadn't happened?" her mother asked quietly. "That you'd just taken a different flight, avoided all of it?" Arya considered the question seriously. "Yes and no. I wish I hadn't been hurt. Wish I didn't have nightmares about handcuffs and bone breaking. Wish I could board a plane without my heart racing. But if it had to happen to someone, I'm glad it was me. Someone with resources and support and a lawyer who happened to be sitting nearby. Someone who survived it and could fight back. That's generous. It's realistic. The system preys on people who can't afford to fight. I could, so I did. For everyone who couldn't." At home, Arya's younger brother Marcus was waiting on the porch. He was 15 now, all long limbs and uncertain bravado, trying to navigate a world that would judge him harshly for existing while black and young and male. "Hey," he said, attempting casualness but unable to hide relief at seeing her safe. "How was DC?" "Intense. Productive. The bill's probably going to pass." "That's good, right? That's what you wanted?" "It's a start. Not an ending, but a start." Arya sat beside him on the porch steps. "Marcus, I need to tell you something. What happened to me? It's going to keep happening to people who look like us. The laws might change, the training might improve, but bias doesn't disappear just because we pass legislation. So what's the point? The point is making it harder, making it riskier for people to act on their bias, creating consequences when they do, giving victims tools to fight back." She looked at her brother, saw the fear he was trying to hide. "You're going to face this stuff. People who assume the worst about you. People who treat you like a threat because of how you look. And when that happens, I need you to remember, it's not about you, it's about them. Their assumptions, their failures, their prejudice. Easy to say, harder to believe when someone's got their knee on your neck." The metaphor was literal and recent enough to make Arya flinch. "You're right. It is harder, but you have to hold on to it anyway. Have to know your worth even when other people refuse to see it." They sat in silence for a moment, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across familiar streets. Inside, their mother was cooking dinner, the smell of her famous jerk chicken drifting through open windows. Normal life, continuing despite everything. "I'm proud of you," Marcus said suddenly, "for not letting them break you, for fighting back even when it was scary." "I'm proud of you too, for existing in a world that's hostile to you and still choosing hope." Arya bumped his shoulder with hers. "We're going to be okay, both of us, because we're stronger than their hate." That night, Arya couldn't sleep. She lay in bed scrolling through news coverage of the Passenger Protection Act, reading comments from people sharing their own stories of airline discrimination. Hundreds of stories. Thousands. An ocean of experiences that had been invisible until hers made space for others to speak. One comment stopped her scrolling. "I was removed from a flight 3 years ago. Security said I looked agitated. I was having a panic attack because flying terrified me. They banned me from the airline for a year. Nobody believed me. Nobody helped. Thank you for making people see that this happens, that we're not lying or exaggerating, that it's real." Arya replied, "I believe you. Your experience matters. Don't let anyone tell you it doesn't." She meant it. Every word. Because she understood now that her platform wasn't just about her own vindication. It was about creating space for every person whose trauma had been dismissed, whose complaints had been ignored, whose humanity had been denied. The Passenger Protection Act passed the Senate by a narrow margin 2 weeks later. Airlines screamed about operational challenges and financial burdens. Shareholders worried about liability exposure, but passengers, millions of passengers who'd experienced or witnessed discrimination, celebrated. The law mandated independent oversight boards at every major carrier, staffed by advocates rather than airline employees. It required annual bias training with real consequences for non-compliance. It created a federal database tracking passenger complaints, making patterns visible instead of buried in individual airline records. It established penalties for filing false reports against passengers, a direct response to what Monica had done to Arya. Was it enough? No. Laws rarely were, but it was more than existed before. More protection, more accountability, more acknowledgement that the system had failed and needed fundamental change. 6 months after the law's passage, Arya received an invitation to speak at a transportation safety conference in Chicago. She almost declined. Public speaking still triggered anxiety, still made her hyper-aware of being watched, judged, evaluated. But the conference was about implementing the new regulations, training airline staff on the updated protocols. Her voice could help shape how those protections were actually applied. She accepted. The conference was massive. 2,000 attendees, mostly airline employees and transportation officials. Arya stood backstage, listening to her introduction, feeling the familiar twist of nerves in her stomach. Our keynote speaker today needs no introduction, but I'll give one anyway. Arya Bennett's experience aboard Flight 447 exposed systemic failures in how airlines handle passenger conflicts. Her refusal to accept a settlement with silence led to reforms that are reshaping our industry. Please welcome Arya Bennett. She walked onto the stage, into blinding lights and applause that felt surreal. Found the center mark, gripped the podium, looked out at faces she couldn't quite see past the stage lights. "I don't like being here," she began, and the honesty made the room go quiet. "I don't like being a symbol or a cautionary tale or a case study. I'd rather be anonymous. But anonymity is a privilege I lost when Monica Hargrove decided I didn't deserve dignity." She told the story again, condensed now, practiced from repetition but still raw in places where memory cut through polish. Described the escalation, the violence, the handcuffs. Described the systemic failures that enabled one person's prejudice to nearly destroy another person's life. "You're here to learn how to implement new regulations," Arya continued. "How to conduct bias training, how to process complaints, how to protect passengers. But regulations don't change hearts. Training doesn't erase assumptions built over lifetimes. What changes things is choice. The choice to question your own reactions, examine your own biases, see passengers as humans rather than problems to manage." She paused, gathering courage for what came next. "Some of you worked with Monica Hargrove. Some of you probably liked her, respected her, thought she was professional. And she was. Right up until she decided someone didn't belong. Then all that professionalism became a weapon. That's what bias does. It turns decent people into agents of discrimination without them even recognizing what they're doing." The room was silent, uncomfortable. Good. Comfort had protected the status quo for too long. "I'm not here to make you feel guilty," Arya said. "I'm here to make you feel responsible. Responsible for examining your assumptions. Responsible for speaking up when colleagues target passengers unjustly. Responsible for creating cultures where abuse gets reported instead of protected. That's uncomfortable work. It's supposed to be. Change always is." She fielded questions for 30 minutes afterward, some hostile, most genuinely curious, all revealing how much education was still needed. One flight attendant asked, "How do we balance authority with avoiding abuse?" "You start by recognizing that authority without accountability is tyranny," Arya replied. "Crew discretion should protect safety, not enforce personal prejudices. When you're making decisions about passengers, ask yourself, would I do this if cameras were recording? If my captain was watching? If the passenger was white?" If the answer changes, you're probably acting on bias instead of policy. Another attendant raised her hand. "I've worked for my airline for 15 years. I've never consciously discriminated. But your story made me wonder about times I might have acted on bias without recognizing it." "How do I know?" "You ask, you listen. You examine the patterns in your own behavior. Who do you question more? Who do you watch more closely? Who gets benefit of the doubt? And who has to prove they deserve it?" Arya's voice softened. "Self-examination is uncomfortable, but it's necessary. And it's ongoing. I still catch myself making assumptions. The difference is I question them now instead of acting on them." The conference ended with commitments from major carriers to implement enhanced protections beyond what the law required. Some were genuine, others performative. Time would reveal which was which. Arya flew home economy again, sitting beside a grandmother traveling to visit her first grandchild. They chatted about babies, and hope and the small joys that made life worth living despite its hardships. No confrontations, no trauma. Just human connection at cruising altitude. When Arya deplaned, she noticed a new poster near the gate, part of the airline's updated passenger rights campaign. It featured diverse faces and simple text. "You belong here, all of you. Small changes, incremental progress. Not enough, but more than before." That had to count for something. At home, Arya opened her laptop and started writing. Not testimony or speeches, but a book, her full story. The parts that didn't make news coverage or legal documents. The nightmares and doubt and moments she'd almost broken. The small acts of courage from strangers who'd helped. The long, difficult journey from victim to survivor to reluctant advocate. She wrote for herself first, but also for every person who'd ever been told they didn't belong. Every passenger who'd been targeted, traumatized, dismissed. Every voice that needed permission to speak. The book would take a year to finish. It would become required reading in airline training programs, assigned in university courses on discrimination and justice. It would reach people Aria would never meet, in places she'd never visit, creating ripples that extended far beyond one broken wrist on one terrible flight. But tonight, she just wrote, putting words to trauma, giving shape to pain, transforming what had been used to destroy her into something that might help others survive. Outside her window, planes passed overhead, red lights blinking against dark sky, carrying thousands of passengers toward thousands of destinations. Most would arrive safely, unremarkably, their journeys forgotten by morning. But some, too many, would experience what Aria had experienced, would be questioned, targeted, harmed, would face the choice between silence and speaking, between accepting injustice and fighting back. Aria's story couldn't save them all, but it could light a path, could show that survival was possible, that justice existed even when delayed, that one person's courage could create change that outlasted their trauma. She saved her document, closed her laptop, looked at the sky. Tomorrow, more flights would depart. More passengers would board with hope or fear or weary resignation. More crew members would make choices about how to wield their authority. And somewhere, because of laws passed and consciousness raised, and one young woman who refused to stay silent, maybe, just maybe, the next Aria wouldn't have to fight quite so hard to prove she belonged. That was enough. It had to be enough. Aria turned off the light and slept, dreamless and whole.